Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast. Technically, episode 3, you could call it episode God knows what if we're following on from the old days, but we're going to call it episode 3 and episode 2 of the individual interviews pods. As we discussed last time when I sat down with Josh to talk about English football, we're going to try and sort of plan out a couple of these individual pods with our co-collaborators and discuss some football that is or isn't happening. I'm sure listeners tuning in will be excited to know that today we're going to talk about the football that is happening. Now, I'm not sure if any of you are aware, because it wasn't sort of broadcasted anywhere, and there certainly wasn't any talk in the media or on Twitter about it. But quietly, the Bundesliga came back last weekend. I know, it's a real surprise to me as well. But all jokes aside, we have got football back. So, of course, we had to have Drew on this week. So, Drew, it's morning. You're a tired man. How are you feeling?
I'm good. Apparently, I'm now an inductee into the French Underground because I'm a co-collaborator. So very nice. I'm very excited. No, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I've created a new phrase there, co-collaborator. I'm going to use that in future. I'll use that for Lana as well later on. So, yeah, good times. Firstly, it's great to pod with you again on a one-to-one basis. Feels like forever. So we're going to waste no time. Then we're going to jump straight in. Now we talked a bit before about this pod and how we wanted to do it, and we just kind of really wanted to spitball a little bit and just talk about kind of the games as they were, the general experience, rather than go through individual matches. But we will start with Dortmund because, for obvious reasons, really,
obvious reasons,
team close to your heart, and the fact that was probably the big match of the weekend. So they beat rival Schalke 4-0. Before we sort of go into the performance, and I know there's a little rant you might want to go on about a certain individual. What was your general experience of Bundesliga coming back? It was built up about football's back, everybody's excited. Yeah, I don't know how I'll save how I felt, but how did you feel about the whole experience?
I honestly, I wasn't a massive fan, and I put it into the group during and post match. I just felt for a match of this stature, to have no supporters at Signal Iduna Park, and just it just felt very weird to me. I don't know. It still feels kind of forced, and there's a large section of the German population through media voting so that they necessarily didn't think that Bundesliga should be rushed back. I'm all for the leagues coming back if I feel like the whole process is really fleshed out, and credit where it's due. I think Germany's done a decent job trying to really figure out the ins and outs of how to get this going to keep the players safe, and I appreciate that 100%. I just feel like, for me, a league that is so, and rightly so, touted on the wonderful fan bases, the way the grounds are, the pageantry behind it, it's very weird to watch it without that support, especially at a ground like Dortmund's, which is, for me, one of the top 5 in the world, without question. All bias aside, of course. So it was just very, very weird, and it didn't help that, I was sitting back and wondering, I still sometimes think that certain clubs are better prepared for a scenario like this than others. And I do wonder if, and this is a whole other discussion for another time, obviously, but I do wonder if that'll sort of reflect itself moving forward. A club like Dortmund is growing quite big. Their infrastructure, the way they're run, the way they're handled, and obviously Schalke are no small club on their own, obviously, so this isn't pertaining to them, but if you look at it, how well is a club like Paderborn going to be able to cope with a scenario like this? Or even smaller clubs, you look down in the lower divisions, a lot of them aren't able to cope. Even trying to push forward to get that money revenue streaming back in, they're not really set up to deal with maybe a scenario like this. So I just don't think that was necessarily factored in other realms, but I think Bundesliga, because it's so reliant on TV revenue, they had to come back. The bigger clubs can sustain and maybe pitch in and help others as well, but it's difficult. I think they were put into a position where they didn't really have a choice. But that said, I still think that it's just such a weird experience watching football without fans. It was like watching a closed-door training match, really. And a lot of times the quality reflected that. Now, obviously, that's because players are not coming back from, they're not fit really as where they should be. They're not in the form they should be, and I think that reflected in Schalke's performance particularly. Dortmund are actually relatively crisp in certain areas despite the layoff. So that was nice to see. But it's going to be quite tricky moving forward. Maybe essentially see how other clubs cope. But it was nice to see a little bit of football. It's just so weird for me. It's just I can't get past that personally. So
yeah, I felt the same way, and something that really opened my eyes is that I've always been like a lover of the game and the technical side and the tactical side like yourself. But it's amazing how, like you say, just not having the atmosphere and not having that fan base and the excitement, the kind of the thrust. Like the thing I love about football is you can be watching a game but maybe not concentrating on it, and then the reaction of a crowd instantly turns your head and you're like, oh, what happened? Like, yeah. and you get that sort of that spike of energy, or when a ball hits the net and the crowd goes up, you just kind of you go with it. And I just found it sort of so, like you said, it down to the celebrations. We all get why they had to celebrate apart, but that seemed weird. It was almost like the players were, to sort of use an analogy of like celebration we'll know well as Arsenal fans. When Dennis Bergkamp did the celebration of the hand over the face thing, it was almost a bit like that. Like the players were almost sort of embarrassed to sort of say, "Oh, I've scored a goal. Oh God, I don't really know what to do." It just felt really strange. But as you said, Dortmund won 4-0, and a couple of standout performances. I want to give a little nudge to Rafa Guerrero.
Not waiting for that.
But yeah, I thought he was fantastic, particularly with Nico Schultz coming in as well and playing. But yeah, his performance, he's come good, hasn't he, at 26?
I think he has. I think he's really found his role, and I think we saw that from him previously when people really started to stand up and take note of him. Was it during the Euro or the World Cup? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's Euros. Yeah.
And then you just see now how he's come on. He's so good going forward. His creativity out wide. You saw that for Portugal, and everyone's finally realizing he actually has something. And now, kind of a couple of years later, people are really seeing that consistency out of him. I think when he first came, you could see what he could bring to the table, but it was a very bit part. He had to settle. He's still trying to figure out his role, if he was going to be a normal traditional left fullback or left wing back. Even left wing. He can play further forward. Yeah. If he really has to. But currently, under this system, it's really bring out the best of all of his qualities, and I think he's meshed quite well with the likes of Julian Brandt and Torgan Hazard, and he's done really well. He's so good at overlapping, so good at playing balls in from deep. He's very good on set pieces as well, as you obviously would know. So I think this is one of those performances where he just took it by the reins, and then I think it's Dortmund are better for it with him. I think for sure. He was excellent, and it's tough because there was a lot of other people. The aforementioned Brandt, I thought Brandt was phenomenal. Torgan Hazard's come on quite well, and now people are seeing why. Some say that he's naturally better than Eden Hazard, depending. Haaland was, of course, as good as Haaland was. It's just an all-around good showing, but it helped because Schalke really were not good on the day. Tactically, completely tactically all over the shop. Just organizationally from on down to the pitch level, it wasn't very good. There just wasn't really any bite, and that almost it's kind of weird because you just see that again for a match of this level, they just didn't seem up for it. Their energy levels also seemed quite low, considering, and that's kind of what I was talking about before. Is that it's going to be very, very hit and miss maybe for the next couple of weeks until everybody kind of gets up to scratch about where they need to be. So it's unfortunate. I'm happy there wasn't some sort of 4-4 thriller personally, but and unfortunately, Schubert had a nightmare as well. I know he came with some promises of Germany's international. He made that move from Dinamo Dresden, but he was not good on the day either. And it just kind of shows there's a lot of kinks in his game where he needs to work out with Nubel leaving in the summer. He's going to have to fight out with Fahrmann unless they make another move for somebody else. So he's got big shoes to fill and fill quickly. And this is kind of one of those moments where you think, is he actually ready yet? I think he has some promise and potential, but for me, I think he may be a couple of years off from that. So that could be tricky for them as well. But there'll be better days for Schalke for sure.
Because didn't Farman went to Norwich, didn't he? Was that a loan?
Yeah, it's on loan. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because I thought at the time that was a weird move, because he consistently, Farman was a quality keeper for Schalke last season. Whenever I saw him, I thought that was a weird move with Krul being number one at Norwich. So yeah, with Newell moving on, you'd expect Farman will come back and reclaim that spot. You would think, I would guess. I guess it depends who's managing Schalke at the time, but yeah, it did seem like a weird one. The other sort of topic just on this game that I did just want to bring up is the hype train. You're a lot like me when it comes to this, whether it be a TV show or a footballer. The minute somebody starts hyping something, I immediately turn my nose up at it and go, well, I'm not going to bother with that then. I speak, of course, of Erling Braut Haaland. Now, he's quite an interesting personality. A lot of people would have seen his interviews where he literally says nothing, and very much plays a character. It's a persona, I think. He just says nothing. That's fine. That's entertaining. He's a young lad, and the talent he's got is clearly there. So we're not for a minute sitting here saying he's, not a brilliant footballer. He clearly is. But there is this sort of this hype train for him that people, I think, are getting a little bit ahead of themselves. Would that be fair? I mean, he's come in and made a huge impression, but we're still early days, aren't we?
It would be fair, and I mean, I'm with you. I think that he has the ingredients there to be, the tip of the spear in terms of center forwards moving forward for the next decade. I think you're thinking about a young player who he's tactically versatile. For a player of his size, he's actually quite quick. His predatory instincts in the box are fantastic. I think you're looking at a player who can be, people think that, and I'm one of them, he has the potential to hit that Robert Lewandowski level of influence in terms of that position. But you already have people calling him a generational talent. That, for me, is the part that frustrates me. You cannot make that assumption statement after what is essentially 2 seasons of playing football at a solid level with Salzburg, and then now at a very good level in Bundesliga with Dortmund. And it's all well and good about what he brings to the table, but this is kind of the same discussion that we had about Aubameyang as well when he was at Dortmund before he went to Arsenal. It's that you're looking at a player who, for all his very good qualities, he does suit what Dortmund do tactically right to the ground, and he fits perfectly into a system around a host of creative players who are experts at getting someone the ball into key danger areas. Like you said, you have Brandt, Hazard, Marco Reus, they're all right behind him. Even Axel Witsel has deep creativity in him. You have, Maklute, who also can pick a good pass. You have all these players who, if they see that pass, if they see that run, they'll hit you with it. So, and with Aubameyang, it was much the same thing in a lot of different respects. So, obviously, when the chances fall to you, you have to put them away. And he has some brilliant solo individual efforts as well. It's not just down to who's around him. He himself has done brilliantly on his own in key scenarios too. So you really can't speak against that. But one of the things I always say is that the players around you will absolutely lift you up. And I always kind of talk to my brother about it. My brother is football for me is basketball for my brother. And Michael Jordan was my brother's favorite player. Like when we were growing up, Jordan was in his prime playing. But anybody who really knows basketball will tell you that Jordan would not have been able to accomplish what he did without someone like Scottie Pippen. Just absolutely no way. And no matter how good he was, even the best players need very good players around them, need elite level players around them. Messi has that in spades. Ronaldo always had that. Even if you look further back, Marco van Basten had that whenever he was at club level internationally. You had all these brilliant players, always had other brilliant players around them. And that certainly helps lift you up a little bit. So it's kind of hard to think, at what point in his career Haaland's going to get to a level where it's going to be undeniable that he is arguably the best center forward in Europe. I think if he continues on the track he's on, I think it won't be too long before we see that. If you're thinking maybe another 2-3 years, and by that time he'll be 22, 23 years old, done developing. Most of his physical development will be usually done by then. So you'll kind of see him in his that period of right before you hit your prime playing years. So you'll see then where he's at. And the question though is, there's a lot of links with Real Madrid wanting to come in for him after next season, and maybe luring Dortmund to do deal using Luka Jovic as kind of a make weight. I think that'll be kind of a test because Jovic was absolutely brilliant at Eintracht Frankfurt, but he couldn't settle at Real Madrid. No matter how good he was on an individual level as a young player, he hasn't settled in Madrid. And now people all of a sudden almost forgot that he existed. So while I don't know who necessarily is the better player per se, but that's a good example. It's very easy to hype young players when they play well. But it doesn't necessarily mean anything. There's a lot of football to be played. He has a lot of developing to do. We don't know how he's going to get on. So we'll have to see.
You almost want to see his trajectory go in the sort of the Mbappe way, isn't it? Move from Salzburg, the equivalent of Monaco, to Dortmund, the equivalent of PSG, and then you almost want to see him play out a solid 1 or 2 seasons at Dortmund and really hone his craft. Because the fear would be, current events notwithstanding, where transfers are probably going to be a lot less or a lot less expensive this summer, but you could foresee. Particularly, like you said, at Real Madrid, who just buy into the hype train of going, well, let's pay £50 million for him straight away, and then he become a massive flop and not go anywhere. His style, in theory, should suit Bundesliga, shouldn't it? In the way he is. It's just whether he continues to develop or almost buys into his own hype. He does seem like quite a grounded guy, in fairness, but
he does. But and that's also a fair point that you've brought up. A lot of young, we've seen it before. I think all of us have seen it before. Countless examples of young players who think too highly of themselves too early. In fact, someone who will be close to Lana's heart, Memphis Depay, is a prime example. He was brilliant at PSV. He jumped to and played quite well for the Netherlands as well. He went to United and it all fell apart for him. And some would say that maybe he wasn't ready. Some would say that maybe it was down to a tactical level why he didn't succeed. But the fact was he didn't succeed. In fact, he was actually quite poor for United. He had 1 or 2 moments where he was very good, but overall it just didn't hit for him. And then he needed sort of a wake-up move, if you will, and Lyon actually fit him very, very well. He's gone there, and now he's kind of rebranded, as I mentioned. He's done well again. So I think that's another good example. Just putting everything in one bag too soon, that's not how professional sports work. So
no, true.
We'll just have to see.
It does transition us nicely into, because I do want to look at a couple of the other sort of big name teams, and Bayern Munich, of course, are the table toppers. They went to Union Berlin and won 2-0. Lewandowski with a penalty, and my old friend Benjamin Pavard with a goal as well. But there is another talent that is grabbing the headlines in Bayern. Or in Munich, I should say, and that's Alphonso Davies. And again, another example of a player who's, to be fair to him, worked his ass off since coming over from Canadian football. Where is, I think, was he at Montreal Impact?
I thought Vancouver Whitecaps.
Oh, the Whitecaps, you're right. Yes, you're right, Whitecaps. He signed obviously for Bayern Munich as a left winger, as an attacking player, and he's kind of rebranded himself into this sort of left back. And by and large, I think he's done very, very well. But again, there's the comparisons coming out of him being one of the best left backs in the world, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that because I don't really feel like he's been tested at the top level in that position too many times yet. But at the same time, credit where credit's due, he has certainly thrived under the new management at Bayern Munich and under Hansi Flick and under their new style of football as well.
I mean, I agree with you. I think he has done very well. I don't think you can speak against that. Evidence sort of does speak for itself. But again, this is kind of why I wanted Josh on this podcast, because Josh and I were speaking briefly about it in a group chat a couple of days ago. And then Josh brought up a very good point, which one I agree with. He's in a Bayern team where, again, Bundesliga is a top quality league for me, but Bayern are a level above. If you look at the ability that club has, the continuity, Hansi Flick has done incredibly well to sort of push them forward after sort of the managerial debacle previously. But if you look at the players who are around him, you have Thiago is not too far away from him. He has, who for me has been the best left back in Bundesliga for the last 6-7 years, however many years. David Alaba is transitioned to left center back, and you have someone of Alaba's ilk sitting right next to him, whispering in his ear, helping him along every step of the way. And yes, it also does help that week in, week out, Davies isn't going to be tested at left back as you're going to be. If he was a player who was playing at this level while playing at a club like Union Berlin, then you'd have to say it's hard to really think that, there's not much about the player. But he's in a Bayern team that are set up very, very well. Defensively, they're very, very stout as always. they integrated him incredibly well as well, but also they highlight his strengths moving forward. He has incredible pace, and that's something you can't teach. And they've brought that out of him, and they've used it tactically to their advantage. And you saw it against Berlin at the weekend, his recovery pace to get back when Union thought they were clear on goal out of nowhere. He just turned up and simply dispossessed. I think it was Ingvartsen. I can't remember correctly, but I think that's who it was. And everyone's lauding him for his ability. But the thing is, recovery pace doesn't mean you're a good defender. It means you're quick. And throughout, you can look back 30, 40 years at other examples of, and even to this day, it's very easy to transition a left winger into a left back, especially if you're thinking of a wing back who wants to go forward constantly and tactically, if that's what you're trying to achieve. It's easy for that. You can almost sometimes kind of say, don't worry about the defensive aspect because we have that covered tactically. And that's why someone like Alaba suits the system that they're trying to instill or that they have instilled. And again, you have other players, the team that do very, very well positionally to cover ground that he might leave behind. So it's easy to keep him covered from exposure. And again, Bayern is just that kind of team that they just pile pressure on. They'll constantly want to keep the ball. So it's easy to not be exposed in that system. But again, that said, I think he has done well. But when you have someone like, and this is probably no surprise to you or I or anybody else really who would have known who he is, but when someone like Grant Wall is saying that, how long until Alphonso Davies is considered the best left back in the world, that sort of grinds my gears a little bit. For similar reasons as to why, people frustrate me when they're talking about Haaland. It doesn't mean he won't get there. It doesn't mean he doesn't have the tools to get there. It means that he's not there yet. And it's going to take a lot more scenarios he has to put himself through before you can possibly say that. And certainly, I forget how many appearances he's made this season. I want to say 13 or 14. I honestly can't remember without looking it up. And certainly, again, he's just not going to be tested the same if he's coming from a different club. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot to him, but he also has a lot to grow still. And for all we know, when Bayern are done with they have massive injury issues in the team, which is the reason why he got his chance in the team in the first place. It's the reason why Alaba was his left back, regardless. Without those opportunities, would he have still broken through? That's one question you have to ask yourself. And we'll just have to see when everyone's fit and firing. The question will be now: will he keep his place? Will he be dropped? That's going to be the debate for Flick. I think he will keep his place, but only because he's earned it, not because he's necessarily better than other players in that position. But you don't drop a young player who's playing well just because everybody's fit now. If he's earned it, he has to lose it again, and he'll have to fight for it. So we'll see. Yeah,
agreed with that. And Bayern Munich, as you say, I think they just casually slid past Union Berlin. It didn't seem like they were at top level, but they didn't really feel like they needed to be. One club that certainly weren't at their top level, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Freiburg, and RB Leipzig hosted Freiburg at the weekend and only came out with a draw, 1-1, thanks to Poulsen's equaliser. They also conceded in the last minute, but it was ruled out for VAR. This will be a bit of a wake-up call, maybe, for Leipzig. They went into the I was going to say the break, then it's not a break at all, is it? But they went into the postponement period, having smashed Spurs, which, fair enough. Less said the better. But they were in really top gear, scoring. I think they were averaging 4 goals a game. They come back from this situation. It's now technically 3 straight draws, if you include the 2 before this all went off, and they're now down to 4th. But it's a good point for Freiburg, but not a result I saw coming. Is it a little bit, not wheels coming off, but maybe teams are working them out a little bit, maybe?
I'm not even sure if it's necessarily that, because they still created more than enough chances to take all 3 points. I just think maybe we'll know after next weekend, depending if their performance improves. But I think it's a lot of rust. They 4 times the amount of chances created over Freiburg. When you see that kind of statistic, you have to think that maybe they just weren't firing on the day. And certainly their forwards played relatively well enough. But Freiburg are tricky. Strike has done incredibly well with them as well. They're sitting in with a chance to get Europe next season. And considering how well drilled they are, I think credit where it's due. If you go away from home to a place like RBL and you get a point, you have to sort of tip your hat to it. But I do think Nagelsmann will be incredibly disappointed because I do think that he'll feel like they would have done enough. I think a lot of the players would have echoed the same. With that said, though, Willi Orban didn't start. Konate didn't start. Upamecano wasn't available through suspension, if I'm not mistaken. So, so three of their top-level center backs weren't even playing. But despite that fact, they still didn't give up a host of chances either. So I do think there was enough for them to really get the 3 points. But I just don't think they were firing on the day. For me, I think that's kind of I would boil it down in simplest terms to that, without going into another rant or a great amount of detail. But you still have to look at it and say that I think he's got Real playing quite well, Nagelsmann. The question for me is if they do lose Timo Werner, how they're going to cope with that and rebound, and what they're going to look like tactically next season without him. How he's going to rejig that, but that's something Nagelsmann will be used to. He's had to deal with that constantly, Hoffenheim before. So I don't know. That's just kind of a moving forward question that we can all think about in the coming weeks and months, potentially, depending on what happens.
He's making plenty of noises, Timo, isn't he? Certainly fluttering his eyelids at Liverpool.
I mean, it's clear he wants to go to Liverpool. I think he's made that abundantly known. There's no question about it where he wants to be, really. But for rightly or wrongly, how he's handled that is a different question. But
I wonder if that move will depend on a certain Roberto Firmino ending up in Munich. That's what I wonder, if that might be a little link to that, where the one goes and then the other one goes and that moves around. Because at the moment, Liverpool probably can't afford to have him. I mean, I always think Timo Werner's wasted wide. I just think he's better as either a 10 or a forward. And I just don't see where he plays in Liverpool's front three at the moment. I mean, you would argue he's probably better than Firmino in terms of technical ability as a goal scorer, but Firmino does a brilliant job to support Salah and Mane. So I don't really know where he would fit, but that's why I'm not Liverpool's manager, I suppose. Another team that were very impressive on the day, they've leapfrogged RB Leipzig into third, is Borussia Mönchengladbach, and they're quietly having a very good season. Maybe not quietly anymore. First minute goal from Alassane Player, I'm quite a big fan of, not just because he's French, of course, but he's taken to that league very well, as indeed has Marcus Thuram, who got second 7 minutes. Renzo Benzebaini, another former French league player, he's had a terrific season as well as a kind of a left wing back. Late goal from Adrien Silva, pulled one back for Frankfurt. But Gladbach they're very impressive, aren't they? They just seem like a very well drilled, very well organised team, and they kind of blew Frankfurt away, who, I mean, they are flying down the table as we speak. That's 4 straight defeats. They're down to 13th. They've got to be a little bit careful looking over their shoulder all of a sudden.
They do, and I think that's one of the examples of when you lose some of your big players, and I don't think they really replaced them as they should have. I think that's kind of, I just think it made a real big impact, and I think you can't really speak against what Adi Huder has done with them, obviously, but I like there's a somewhat lacking quality in certain areas with Eintracht, especially for me creatively. I think they lack in a big way. So enough to constantly get the results that you would need against some of the clubs you're coming up against. So no, I don't. Again, but an off day, and you're not going to know how they're going to respond for another couple of weeks. That's probably something we're going to keep saying. But for a side who did so well in the Europa League, in the not too distant past, this is kind of a maybe shot in the arm a little bit. I don't think they're going to end up being relegated, but certainly when you look at the fact that they've only picked up one result in their last 5, they've lost 4 on the spin. That is for sure concerning, especially when they're sitting below teams like Union Berlin and Köln, who just came back up. Maybe even Freiburg, who I think are playing above their means for now. You're not going to be, if you're a Frankfurt supporter, you're kind of in a little bit of a concern, considering you're only sitting 5 points out of relegation playoff spot at the moment. So, but credit is due to Gladbach. I think Michael Ollis has done very well with them. Again, you look at the numbers. What are they? Third best defensive record in the league. They don't score as much as the teams around them. Obviously, I think both Dortmund and Bayern have scored over 20 goals more than they have. Leipzig have scored over 10 more than them as well. So, but I think the thing I like about Gladbach is they're balanced. I think from in terms of how they deploy tactically to the way they sort of shuffled around their starting 11, I think it's one of the more balanced sides in the league. From that front, you can't look at them and say they have a ton of weaknesses, but they don't have enough strength to really. I don't think they'll really challenge, Bayern and Dortmund moving forward. But I think they have enough to get Champions League for sure. I know that John will be happy about that, no doubt. But yeah, I think Rose deserves a lot of credit. But he's another one who fans have definitely hyped up quite a bit.
Big time, yeah. He's definitely being tipped for like big jobs, isn't he? That's been very apparent. Yeah.
And again, it's not because he's not capable. It's just because it's a lot of managers can. The same thing with players. A lot of managers and players can come in and in the first year have like that purple patch and just do everything right. It's almost like a bit of clairvoyance, if you will. And then the next season, the wheels kind of fall off. We've seen that from managers in recent history, very, very recent history as well. A brilliant season, and all of a sudden everything comes crashing down the next. So I don't know if I don't think that's going to be necessarily his track, but I think he's done one look at his team and know how to set it up. I like that he's getting a lot of industry out of Real Mbolo, whose career was really stagnant at Schalke after he moved from Basel.
Yeah.
So that's been good to see. Jonas Hoffman has done much better under him than we've seen him, and he's finally showing a bit of what people thought they were going to see out of him when he was at Dortmund, and they didn't really get a chance to. So that's quite nice to see as well. So yeah, I just feel like I don't know. I think they're deserving of Champions League. I just don't know if they're at that level. People think that they can consider them true challengers, but again, they're only sitting 6 points off Bayern, and there's 8 matches to go, so anything is possible. Certainly, they could catch Dortmund. They could pull away from Leipzig, depending. So it's going to be interesting. I like the fact that the second to fifth is only separated by 4 points. I'm quite a fan of that this season as well, which is the usual. So good for them.
Good season for Gladbach would be Champions League football for sure, and that would be a step forward, definitely. I do want to have a look at the teams down the bottom end sort of as a whole. My lads Paderborn got a 0-0 draw, unfortunately, and they're still not cut adrift, but certainly not in a great spot. I mean, 6 points from safety at the moment, or from that relegation spot. But the name that jumps out down there is Werder Bremen, who are second bottom, so not even in the playoff spot. They are, as it stands, heading for Bundesliga 2, which is a massive fall from grace for them. They lost to Bayer Leverkusen, and Kai Havertz inspired by Leverkusen on Monday. Also teams down there, Fortuna Düsseldorf, Mainz, Augsburg, we mentioned Eintracht Frankfurt, Union Berlin just above that. But yeah, I mean, any of those clubs jump out at me. I suppose Werder Bremen is the team really to look at. I mean, what has gone so wrong there to be so far down the table? I knew they were struggling this year, but even I was quite shocked when I saw how badly they were doing.
I mean, they were hit by a huge injury bug the first half of the season. That really didn't help. But it's just, for me, they've been so, it's not just inconsistent. They've just been poor in a lot of areas, and they're just not getting the goals. First and foremost, I think if they don't have the worst goal record in the league, I think it's only Düsseldorf who best them there, I think, if I'm not wrong. But also defensively, it's just not been good. And for as good of a manager that Florian Kohfeldt is, and I think that he's kind of one of those new breed of managers, similar to Nagelsmann. They have a very similar managerial education. A lot of the principles kind of a little bit of the same, like to work with young players. These are all good things, but I don't know how he truly wants to play football. I don't know if that suits Bremen. I think you're seeing that clash a little bit. I think he has a lot of the pieces to put it through, but I don't know if those are pieces that he can really rely on, again, consistently. And then now they're thinking about there's links with Milo Rashica leaving in the summer. That's going to be a huge blow as well. He's been probably their only real creative outlet, consistent outlet this season. It's been him. Leads the club in goals. Pretty sure leads the club in assists as well this season. So for me, I just think it's just they're not there yet. And I think it was too much too soon in terms of how maybe what he wanted to instill with the club. I don't know if it wasn't like a gradual build with kind of what he wanted to achieve on the pitch. It was more of kind of like, this is where we need to be as quickly as possible. I don't think that was the right way to go. I think you're kind of seeing that this season. Again, despite how good he is, maybe mentally as a manager, I don't think he has the tools available to him to really put forth what he wants to do. And certainly, Bremen do not have the cash to fund getting the players really they need to develop in a big way. That's certainly not going to help. So I think they're going to fall behind a little bit with that by default. And they're going to.
They can't defend, can they? That's the big thing.
No, they also can't defend. But I also think that's maybe, you could say maybe it's a little bit down to the quality that they have available to them. Defensively, really not very good. In comparison to maybe even some of the clubs around them who on paper have decent defensive options, but they just can't get it done on the pitch. I think Bremen just don't have the players available to be able to defend very well. And sometimes no amount of drilling and well structuring your team, sometimes that's just not enough. Maybe a bit of tactical imbalance in midfield as well. At certain times, I think trying to rejig that has sort of presented other problems. Trying to fix one problem has begotten another problem. So it's just a mess for them.
They're almost relying on the idea that two other clubs will be worse than them this season. And as I say, Paderborn, unfortunately, it does look like a return to the second division is likely. And then you've got clubs like Augsburg and Eintracht Frankfurt, whose form is through the floor and are falling. So they would just be hoping, I guess, that they will get enough points to sneak out. But as we saw with Hamburg previously, that doesn't always work. Just in terms of the chase at the top end, there is quite a gap. 11 points in this case between 6th and 5th, but two of the form sides in the Bundesliga sort of again allowing for the break for everything that's gone on with COVID. But Wolfsburg and Leverkusen, as you just mentioned, two really sort of impressive sides who've been out of the limelight for the longest times and are slowly rebuilding, particularly Wolfsburg. I mean, they won at the weekend away at Augsburg, and every time I've watched them, I don't know what it is. Something about them impresses me. I'm not even quite sure what that is. But any team that can get the best out of their course is probably doing something right. But what have you made of Leverkusen and Wolfsburg's kind of restructuring of their size and return to form? Because they've been much better this year.
Yeah, but Leverkusen are tricky. Like they've always usually had players available to them to really sort of put themselves in a conversation yearly about getting Champions League football. Certainly, if not Champions League football, then Europa League. They have a brilliant bunch. They've got a lot of good young players there. I mean, it has, obviously everyone talks about Kai Havertz and how good he has performed, his flexibility tactically. You've got a player who can play as a 6, as an 8, as a 10, as a center forward, can even be chucked out wide in the pinch if you really need it when you're doing a flat 4 midfield. So when you have a player like that, you can build your nucleus around. And he's only 20 years old. It's actually quite impressive. But Kevin Volland's done quite well, I think, and he's now earned himself the moniker of another player linked with Arsenal. So good on you, Mr. Volland. But Moussa Diaby's come on quite well. I know you'll be happy about that. Another French player, Tony Bitts, he's done very well. But again, those younger players, I think that they're starting to turn up. Tapsoba is another one who has been very, very, very good. And again, he's come out of relative obscurity in a way. Not many people would have heard of him until he made that move, and he's really hit the ground running. I think getting the Bender brothers, trying to keep them fit, healthy for once in their careers, that's been a real key leadership and experience ingredient to a core of a team that's actually quite young. Aaron Geese has been very good as well, just in terms of being able to be that midfield pitbull and that dino that they kind of need to where he's now earned links to bigger clubs as well. I think if you again, it's there's a balance to them, but also in that balance, there's a lot of expression. I think you're getting in that all these the younger footballers coming through now, especially whether if they're German or not, in Germany, that they'd love to express themselves. I think they finally have enough of that about them, I think, to really find a better balance. And for me, I think when we think back to previous seasons where we saw them struggle, I think they lacked a lot of balance. I thought you'd say that either they could attack very well, or in moments they could defend, but they could never do both. And I think you would always think about how they would just get run through in midfield and the balance was off, and then it's just one domino would always fall after the other with them.
Keep talking. That's my delivery.
but I think for once you're finally seeing sort of bearing the fruits of the work that they have done. And credit to why his name escaped me. I don't know why I can't think this morning. But Peter Bosch, he's done very well with them. And despite his struggles at Dortmund, I do think that he's got them playing the type of football and utilizing the right core of players to maybe get them back into Europe consistently year in, year out. Because again, even when they lose Havertz, you have to think about Leverkusen as a team who has the ability and talent available to really sort of push themselves forward. And I think that's important for them.
And I've returned. Seamlessly. Sorry, it's just always the way, isn't it? When you record a podcast and you get a delivery right in the middle of it. Sorry, dear listener, I'm sure you.
No, it's okay.
To kind of I'm out of breath now. To kind of finish things off. I just wanted to get your overall kind of. We've touched on the lack of atmosphere. We've touched on the situation in terms of we both agree that it seems strange that the football was back in the Bundesliga and back full stop. But moving forwards, do you see this being a situation where obviously the testing will continue? We're still going to have a lot of distancing. We're still not going to have fans. We know that. But do you sort of feel moving forwards that normality will begin to kick in for the Bundesliga now, and the season will ultimately get completed?
I mean, everyone's talking about how the fact that through player testing that there's not a big concern for Bundesliga right now. I mean, that's all well and good, but it's funny to me that no matter what we've seen come out of this period with COVID, about unexpected turns, we don't really know much. We're trying to learn as we go and then adapt our approach depending on the things that we find out. For all we know, within 2 weeks, those low testing numbers could skyrocket. We don't know this yet. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, you take it by a week basis for me. If every week, the numbers keep staying as they are, and it is safe for players to play, I think they'll continue it. I think they'll go through with it. It's still going to be a very weird experience watching any football without one of the key ingredients, if not the key ingredient to the game, is fans around the game. So that's a bit odd for me. But if they can guarantee the safety, then I think they'll do it. It's just going to be so weird. Again, it's good to see some football again. Obviously, I think we all were going a bit stir crazy in terms of not having, I would say, any of us who are this passionate about it. You use football as almost like an outlet in a way. Like, I had a rough week, at work, potentially, I can't wait to watch my club play. That's kind of like, where you see yourselves. It's like you enjoy the community, you enjoy chatting about it with your friends, and this kind of thing. I think people did miss that in a way. And I think the clamor was born out of just that desire to have some semblance of normalcy in people's lives again. And I can understand that. But for me, my concern only ever as someone who was a coach is the safety of the players. If the players can be safe, if the staff can be safe, if the managers can be safe, if anyone involved with the on day-to-day going of the club is going to be safe, then if they can do it, then I'm not going to speak against that aspect. It's just, for me, it's just very weird.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Whole scenario is weird, isn't it? And your thoughts just sort of away from Bundesliga. We had 6 confirmed cases in the UK, or in England, I should say, in terms of Premier League footballers. Do you still see money being ultimately what will be responsible for the Premier League returning to action? I mean, Josh made a good point yesterday in our group that 6 out of the 700 odd tests or whatever is actually quite low. But on the same or flip side, I would say 6 is 6 too many for me personally. But money ultimately, do you think will be the breakdown of the Premier League returning?
I think it will, and I think money's for me, was the main driving factor is why Bundesliga had to come back again, because of the TV revenue that clubs just really needed. I don't think the Premier League needs the money in the same way. There's more money in England than there is in Germany, particularly at a certain level. But I think when you have commitments to sponsorships, to TV rights, with the amount that players get paid in England, you do need some semblance of money coming in to be able to afford doing everything. So I think it will come back. I don't know when it doesn't. I mean, by the looks of it, by what I know, but it seems like we're maybe only a couple of weeks away from it coming back.
Yeah, mid-June.
Something. Yeah, that sounds about right. But I can also see your point. Like 6 can turn into 20, which can turn into 50, which can turn. You know what I mean? Like it can exacerbate, and it can just keep expounding upon itself if you're not careful with it. So if players test positive, they have to take the utmost precautions in dealing with the fact that 6 players tested positive. I think Josh is right to say that 6 out of almost 800 players is an incredibly low number, and that could be seen as a sign of encouragement. But it can also be seen as, well, if 6 players have it and they just got tested in 2 weeks, players who didn't have it could then test and end up having it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
or even less than 2 weeks. You never know whenever symptoms start to expose themselves. So that's going to be the tricky part of it. Is to really manage. Once you know a player or players have it, you have to do whatever you must to make sure that you can limit exposure of other players to those players that had it. As long as it's not too late, but for some it might end up being too late. Next week we might have more tests and more cases, so we'll have to just see. But I see both sides of the argument. But again, I'm not in the medical field. I only know what I read or what I'm told or what I research. You know what I mean? So. If they really feel like the risk is worth the reward, then they're going to go ahead, and I do think the money will drive it. And I think the powerful money men behind that will certainly do what they can to get things back to what they feel is normal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Money talks at the end of the day, doesn't it? Fortunately, that's not the case with this podcast because we don't make any money, so we will just continue talking full stop. But yes, I think the plan will be to do a couple more specials individually, as we've done today, and I think probably we'll utilise you a fair bit in the coming weeks, because obviously Bundesliga is up and running, so we will continue to cover that, and when we have a group sort of discussion with everybody on the pod again, it'll be very interesting to see how many leagues follow the German model, if you will, in terms of how they bring their leagues back, because certainly it does seem like a lot of leagues have sat back and gone, well, we'll sit back and see how Germany do, and then we'll make our decisions. It'll be very interesting to see what comes of it moving forwards. But we'll keep tabs on that and see what gives. But that's good. That's good stuff. It's been good to have you back, Andrew, and now you can have a nice relaxing afternoon without having to worry too much about running around and panicking too much. It'll be nice to have a nice afternoon.
I mean, it's weird. Like it's just going on like the day to day. It's weird not having to worry about things like going to work and not fucking going anywhere. Like I have a lot of friends who either live in Europe or live in the US in less populated areas, and they're always post pictures like Josh went for a bike ride. That's fantastic. Like I'm really happy Josh got to go out, but Josh also lives in the middle of nowhere. And you live in Plymouth, so it's obviously there's just fewer instances of you running into people. You can do things like have your daily, because you don't have to worry about something like that nature. But like even where I live in New York City, I live in the city limits, but I live in an area that's it's just more suburban. It's less populated. Like I don't live in Times Square, for example. Everyone who thinks you're from New York, they think you live in Times Square. But you don't live in Times Square. It's just weird not being able to do even just the little things. Like if I wanted to go have a beer with a friend right now, I wouldn't even do it. I can, it's just, even if things were open, I still wouldn't do it.
No.
So it's just you take it a day at a time and you try to make the best of it. So what I would say is the good thing about football being back is I can at least watch it instead of just playing Football Manager.
Enjoy it from home kind of thing. This is something to watch. And of course, give it a week before we're all sick of the amount of people who are on Twitter telling us their new German team that they've adopted. That's the only downside, isn't it? Everyone's suddenly become a German football expert. But,
pretty much.
I'll stick to the ones I know. I think that's the best way forward. But No, it's been good. We will of course catch up again with you, but also I want to thank you for coming on today and being a part of this pod. And we'll certainly have you back on when we're in a group setting again, and let's see where things go. So thank you very much for coming on today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me as always.
Good stuff. And thank you to our listeners. Just to give you an idea of what we got coming up, I'll be doing a sit down with Lana next. That's the plan. So we'll talk all things Italian football and how things are happening in Serie A. And then we'll also have a one-on-one with Joel coming up in terms of what things are going on in Spain. That's probably likely to be next week, I'd imagine, with that one. And then we'll have a group setting where we can all sit down together and do things again. But until that time, thank you very much for tuning in. As always, if you've got any feedback or if you want anything specifically covered or want us to discuss anything, let us know. We're staying under the kind of the ABW banner, so just tweet us sort of individually or via the ABW podcast, and we will do our best to make things happen. But until then, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy, and all things German. Keep enjoying your German football until we've got some more back. But my thanks to Drew, and my thanks to you listeners for tuning in, and we will speak to you very soon.